Deep in a remote Jordanian cave, where sunlight barely reaches and the air hums with ancient silence, a discovery was made that would send shockwaves through the world of archaeology. Tucked away in the darkness, hidden for centuries, were a collection of metal books, 70 to be exact, bound with rings of corroded lead. These weren't just any relics. The Jordan Lead Codices, as they came to be known, were etched with cryptic symbols, strange illustrations, and texts that seemed to whisper secrets from a forgotten past. Who created them, what knowledge did they guard, and why were they buried in such a desolate place, as if someone, or something, wanted them to stay hidden forever? From the moment they were uncovered, these codices sparked fierce debate. Some scholars believe they held the earliest known Christian writings, possibly even linked to the followers of Jesus himself. Others dismissed them as elaborate forgeries, a modern hoax wrapped in the patina of age. But here's what's undeniable: the symbols on these metal pages don't match anything we've seen before. Mysterious faces peer out from the lead, surrounded by celestial maps, cryptic trees, and what might be coded messages. One plate shows a figure standing before a walled city, arms raised as if delivering a prophecy or a warning. Another depicts a 7-branched candlestick, a symbol steeped in ancient mysticism. What were the creators trying to tell us, and why did they choose lead, a metal associated with both alchemy and secrecy, to preserve their teachings? This isn't just a story about old books, it's a puzzle that stretches across time, touching on faith, hidden knowledge, and the lengths people will go to protect or suppress the truth. Were these codices meant to guide initiates through forgotten rituals? Could they contain lost gospels, banned by later religious authorities? Or might they be something even stranger, a bridge between worlds, a key to understanding secrets buried deeper than the cave where they were found? As we unravel their mysteries together, you'll hear from experts who have risked reputations to study them, see high-resolution images that reveal clues invisible to the naked eye, and decide for yourself whether these artifacts are one of history's greatest discoveries or its most intriguing deception. The journey starts here. The story of the Jordan Lead Codices begins in a rugged landscape steeped in history, the caves near the Dead Sea, where the dry air and hidden crevices have preserved secrets for thousands of years. It was between 2005 and 2007 when a local Bedouin man named Hassan Sida made the discovery that would ignite controversy. While searching for lost goats in the cliffs near the village of Saham, he stumbled upon a cave entrance partially obscured by rocks. Inside, tucked into a narrow crevice, was a collection of metal books, their surfaces darkened with age. Unlike the fragile parchment of the Dead Sea Scrolls found decades earlier, these were made of lead and copper, bound with metal rings as if designed to last forever. At first, experts were skeptical. The idea of ancient metal books was unprecedented, and the symbols etched into them didn't match any known script from the region. Some dismissed them outright, suggesting they were clever forgeries meant to mimic the fame of other biblical-era discoveries. But then came the tests. Initial metallurgical analysis suggested the codices had indeed corroded naturally over centuries, and the patina, the layer of oxidation on their surfaces, appeared authentic. Even more intriguing, some of the iconography seemed to point to early Christian symbols, like crosses and what might be a depiction of Jerusalem. Could these books have been hidden by a sect of Jesus's followers, preserving teachings too dangerous to share openly? The location only deepened the mystery. The cave where Sida found the codices lies just miles from where the Dead Sea Scrolls were uncovered, texts that revolutionized our understanding of Judaism and early Christianity. Was this another cache of forbidden knowledge, buried to protect it from destruction? Or were they something else entirely, perhaps artifacts of a secretive mystical tradition, one that blended Jewish, Christian, and even pagan beliefs? The debate raged among scholars. with some claiming the codices could rewrite religious history, while others warned against jumping to conclusions without definitive proof. One thing was clear: whoever created these books went to extraordinary lengths to ensure they survived. Lead doesn't decay like parchment or papyrus. It endures, and that choice, heavy, permanent, almost ominous hints at a message meant to outlast empires. As researchers pieced together fragments of the timeline, another question emerged: why were these texts hidden in such a remote cave? The Dead Sea region was no stranger to upheaval. In the 1st century, Roman rule was tightening its grip, Jewish revolts were brutally crushed, and early Christian communities faced persecution. If the codices contained heretical or revolutionary ideas, stashing them away would have been a matter of survival, but there's another possibility, one that sends a chill down the spine. What if they weren't hidden to protect them from outsiders, but to protect outsiders from them? Some of the symbols resemble warnings, like the ancient Jewish tradition of sealing away dangerous knowledge. Could these books hold secrets considered too potent, too destabilizing for the uninitiated? The answers, if they exist at all, are still locked in those leaden pages, waiting to be decoded. The Jordan Lead Codices aren't just mysterious for their content, their very construction defies expectations. Each codex consists of rough, hand-sized lead sheets, some as thick as a credit card, bound together with metal rings that show signs of deliberate craftsmanship. Unlike ancient scrolls or parchment books, these metallic pages were designed to withstand time. The surfaces are etched with bizarre imagery, celestial bodies that might represent constellations, temple-like structures with cryptic archways, and human figures whose elongated faces stare solemnly from the corroded metal. Most puzzling of all is the script, a jumble of Proto-Hebrew characters mixed with Greek letters, sometimes arranged in circular patterns as if meant to be read in a specific order. This hybrid language has no direct parallel in known historical texts, leaving linguists scrambling for references. Then comes the question burning in every scholar's mind: are they real? The controversy hinges on two conflicting narratives. On one side, initial metallurgical tests conducted by experts like Peter Northover, an Oxford University materials scientist, suggested the lead's corrosion patterns matched ancient artifacts. The patina, the greenish-blue crust formed by centuries of oxidation, appeared layered and undisturbed, a detail nearly impossible to fake convincingly. Even the dirt embedded in the rings matched soil samples from the Dead Sea region, but skeptics fired back. Some pointed to inconsistencies in the Hebrew lettering, noting odd stylistic choices that deviated from first-century scripts. Others questioned why no other metal books from this period had ever surfaced. Despite lead being a common material in the ancient world, the debate grew so heated that Jordanian authorities intervened, confiscating some codices amid claims of artifact smuggling and forgery rings. What makes authentication so difficult is the codices' strange duality. Some plates depict clear early Christian motifs, a possible crucifixion scene, a figure resembling Jesus holding a staff near what might be the Jordan River. Yet others show symbols tied to Jewish mysticism, like menorahs with unusual branching patterns, or what scholars speculate could be references to the lost Temple of Jerusalem. Then there are the downright enigmatic elements: a recurring 8-pointed star, geometric shapes resembling alchemical diagrams, and sequences of dots that some believe encode numerical secrets. This fusion of traditions has led to wild theories, everything from Gnostic gospel fragments to Templar treasure maps, but without a Rosetta Stone-like key to decipher them, even the most advanced imaging technology can't confirm if these are profound spiritual texts or an elaborate puzzle box meant to mislead. The irony is that the codices' greatest strength, their durability, also complicates the truth. Lead survives where parchment crumbles, yet it resists carbon dating, the gold standard for ancient artifacts. While ink on parchment can be tested for organic compounds, etched metal reveals little about when those marks were made. some researchers have turned to analyzing tool marks under microscopes, searching for telltale signs of modern engraving tools versus ancient chisels. Initial results were inconclusive, deepening the divide between believers and skeptics. Even the cave's location raises eyebrows. Its proximity to known first-century hiding places for sacred texts suggests intentional placement, yet the lack of other artifacts nearby makes it seem oddly isolated. Amid the scientific clashes, one haunting detail lingers. Several codices feature what looks like a map not of earthly locations, but of a walled city with towers arranged in precise alignment to celestial markers. Ancient astronaut theorists have latched onto this, proposing connections to extraterrestrial contact, while traditional scholars see metaphorical representations of heavenly Jerusalem. But perhaps the most compelling clue lies in a barely visible inscription near one such map, 3 Greek letters chi, iota, sigma, spelled in a way that could shorthand Christos, the Anointed One. If genuine, this tiny detail could place the codices squarely in the realm of early Christian esoterica, a snapshot of a time when messianic movements whispered their truths in code. Until someone cracks that code, the lead books will keep their secrets, leaving us to wonder if we're holding heresy or Holy Grail. The symbols carved into the Jordan Lead Codices aren't just random etchings, they're a visual language, one that scholars believe might hold the key to unlocking their true purpose. Take the 8-pointed star, a motif that appears repeatedly across multiple plates. At first glance it resembles the Star of Bethlehem, but there's a twist. In early Jewish mysticism, 8-pointed stars were linked to the divine presence, often representing the intersection of heaven and earth. Some researchers suggest it could symbolize the 8 days of Hanukkah, a celebration of light and resilience. Others argue it mirrors ancient Mesopotamian star maps, hinting at a fusion of traditions lost to time. Then there's the menorah, but not the traditional 7-branch candelabrum we recognize today. These depictions feature unusual branching patterns, some with 9 or even 11 arms. Could this be a reference to a forgotten sex rituals, or perhaps a coded representation of the Tree of Life, a concept central to Kabbalistic teachings? Palm trees emerge as another recurring theme, their fronds meticulously detailed alongside what appear to be streams or rivers. In biblical tradition, palm trees symbolize victory and righteousness, often associated with the oasis towns of the ancient Near East. But here they're paired with geometric patterns resembling irrigation channels, leading some to speculate these aren't just spiritual symbols, they might be practical diagrams, possibly even instructions for hidden desert settlements. The most haunting images, however, are the faces, staring solemnly from the lead. Their elongated features and wide eyes evoke the stylized portraits found in early Christian catacombs. Yet unlike those depictions which usually represent saints or martyrs, these faces are nameless, their expressions unreadable. Are they guardians of secret knowledge? Ancestral spirits, or perhaps representations of the codices' creators, watching across centuries? What makes these symbols so tantalizing and so frustrating is their deliberate ambiguity. Unlike the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were written in clear Hebrew and Aramaic, the codices refuse to fit neatly into any known tradition. The palm tree might echo the Psalms, righteous flourishing like a palm, but it's juxtaposed with celestial charts that track lunar cycles, suggesting a blend of spiritual and astronomical knowledge. The faces, meanwhile, bear a striking resemblance to descriptions of angelic beings in apocryphal texts like the Book of Enoch, where celestial watchers descend to earth with forbidden wisdom. Even the script itself defies categorization. Some letters mirror ancient Hebrew, while others look like distorted Greek or even Proto-Arabic. This isn't just a mixing of languages, it's a deliberate obfuscation, as if the creators were writing in a cipher meant to be understood only by initiates. Theories about these symbols vary wildly. One camp argues they're fragments of a Gnostic gospel, encoding esoteric Christian teachings suppressed by the early church. The menorahs in this view might represent the 7 churches of Revelation, while the 8-pointed star signifies the 8th day of creation, a Gnostic concept of spiritual rebirth. Another perspective ties them to Jewish revolt leaders like Bar Kokhba, who used coded imagery to organize resistance against Rome, but the most provocative idea comes from researchers who see parallels to ancient metallurgical texts. Lead in alchemical traditions was considered a base metal capable of transformation, a metaphor for the soul's journey. Could these codices be instructions for something far more mysterious than prayer, a recipe for transcendence, etched in metal to withstand the ages? Until someone deciphers their full meaning, the symbols remain a riddle wrapped in corrosion, whispering across millennia in a language we've yet to fully understand. Among the most contentious images in the Jordan Lead Codices is a haunting depiction of a robed figure with arms outstretched, flanked by what appear to be 2 vertical posts. To some researchers, this unmistakably resembles a crucifixion, but if authenticated, it would append everything we know about early Christian art. Traditional scholarship holds that the first depictions of Jesus on the cross didn't appear until at least the 5th century, nearly 400 years after his death. Prior to that, early Christians used symbolic imagery like fish or shepherds to represent their faith discreetly under Roman persecution. Yet here, in these lead pages possibly dating to the 1st or 2nd century, we see what might be the oldest known representation of the crucifixion, a claim that, if proven, would rewrite history. The figure's posture is eerily evocative, arms extended as if nailed to a crossbeam, though curiously, no cross is explicitly shown. Instead, 2 vertical lines frame him, possibly symbolizing the crucifixion's duality, earth and heaven, guilt and redemption. His face is serene, almost expectant, with large eyes that seem to gaze beyond the metal's surface. Surrounding him are symbols that deepen the mystery: a crescent moon hovering above one shoulder, a cluster of 7 stars near his feet, and what might be a rudimentary halo encircling his head. These elements don't match later Byzantine or medieval crucifixion art, where suffering is emphasized. Instead, they suggest something more akin to a cosmic ascension, a moment of transformation rather than torment. Skeptics argue the scene could depict any number of things: a prophet blessing a crowd, a mystic in prayer, or even a pre-Christian deity like Tammuz, an ancient Near Eastern god associated with resurrection. The absence of overt Christian markers like a crown of thorns or nailed hands leaves room for doubt, but proponents counter with subtle clues. The figure wears a fringed garment reminiscent of Jewish priestly robes, tying him to the temple tradition, while the stars above him align with descriptions of Jesus as the morning star in early Christian texts. Even more provocative is the presence of what might be Greek letters Alpha and Omega, flanking his shoulders, a clear reference to Christ's divine omnipresence in Revelation. The implications are staggering. If this is a crucifixion scene from the 1st century, it suggests early Christians were depicting Jesus's death symbolically far earlier than believed, and in a medium meant to endure. Lead wasn't chosen for casual artistry, it was a deliberate act of preservation, as if the creators feared these images might be lost to time or suppression. This challenges the long-held assumption that early Christians avoided crucifixion imagery due to its association with shame and criminality. Instead, it hints at a clandestine tradition that embraced the cross as a mystical emblem from the very beginning. But the controversy doesn't end there. The figure's surroundings include elements that defy straightforward Christian interpretation. Behind him stands a walled city, perhaps Jerusalem, but its gates are sealed, and a strange tower-like structure rises at its center. Some researchers see this as the temple, destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE, suggesting the image commemorates not just Jesus' death, but the devastation of Judaism's holiest site. Others propose it represents the heavenly Jerusalem described in apocalyptic literature, a promise of restoration after catastrophe. The crescent moon adds another layer. In ancient Near Eastern symbology, it represented cyclical renewal, but in Roman contexts, it was tied to the goddess Diana, protector of the marginalized. Was this a covert way to signal solidarity with persecuted believers? The debate intensifies when examining the figure's face. Unlike later Christian art, which idealized Jesus's features, this portrayal is strikingly human: elongated nose, deep-set eyes, a faint smile that's neither joyful nor sorrowful. It mirrors descriptions in the apocryphal Acts of John, where Jesus's appearance shifts unnervingly, suggesting his form was fluid, transcendent. This aligns with Gnostic beliefs that Christ's true nature was beyond physical representation. If the codices are Gnostic artifacts, their crucifixion scene might not depict a historical execution, but a metaphysical moment, the crossing over of divine wisdom into the material world. Timing is everything. The Codices' possible first-century origin places them squarely in the era when Christianity was fracturing into competing sects, each with wildly different views of Jesus. Was he a martyred teacher, a divine emanation, a revolutionary? The lead book's imagery refuses to commit to one narrative, instead blending symbols from Jewish mysticism, pagan astrology, and nascent Christian theology. This mosaic of influences suggests their creators weren't outsiders but insiders, people who knew the temple rituals, the Roman occupation, and the secret debates raging among believers. They may have buried these books not because they were heretical, but because they were too revelatory, too dangerous for a world where faith was being standardized and dissent silenced. What emerges isn't just a challenge to art history timelines, it's a window into a lost moment when the story of Jesus was still being written, literally and figuratively, in metal and mystery. Whether the figure is Christ, a Gnostic teacher, or someone else entirely, his presence in the Codices forces us to reconsider how early believers visualized their faith. And if the lead preserves a crucifixion scene predating Constantine by centuries, it means the cross's power as a symbol was never hidden, just guarded, waiting in darkness for the right moment to be found. The Jordan Lead Codices aren't the only ancient metal texts to emerge from the rugged cliffs near the Dead Sea. Decades earlier, in 1852, archaeologists uncovered the Copper Scroll, one of the most baffling artifacts among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Unlike its parchment companions, this scroll was made of copper, etched with cryptic directions to hidden treasure. The parallels are impossible to ignore. Both were crafted from metal, both were buried in remote caves, and both seem to guard secrets meant only for those who could decipher their codes. But while the Copper Scroll lists tangible treasures, gold, silver, and sacred vessels, the Lead Codices hint at something far more elusive: spiritual knowledge, perhaps even a map to enlightenment itself. Take the symbols. The Copper Scroll's text is straightforward, if maddeningly vague, with phrases like, "in the ruin that is in the valley," directing seekers to hidden caches. The Lead Codices, by contrast, offer visual riddles, celestial diagrams, temple blueprints, and what might be encoded references to sacred sites. Some researchers speculate these aren't just random illustrations. The recurring 8-pointed star, for instance, aligns with descriptions in the Copper Scroll's final column, which mentions a house of the Lord, marked by a celestial sign. Could both artifacts be pointing to the same lost sanctuary, one with physical riches and the other with divine wisdom? Material science adds another layer of intrigue. The Copper Scroll's metal sheets were so brittle that scholars had to cut them apart to read the text, a stark contrast to the Lead Codices' sturdier, ring-bound design. Yet both metals held symbolic weight in antiquity. Copper represented durability and divine judgment in ancient Near Eastern cultures, often used for temple doors and ritual objects. Lead, on the other hand, was associated with secrecy and transformation, favored by alchemists for its malleability and resistance to decay. The choice of materials suggests these weren't casual records but deliberate vessels for forbidden or sacred knowledge, meant to outlast papyrus and parchment. Then there's the question of authorship. The Copper Scroll is written in a peculiar dialect of Hebrew, with linguistic quirks that set it apart from other Dead Sea texts. Similarly, the Lead Codices blend Hebrew, Greek, and indecipherable glyphs, as if their creators were deliberately obscuring their message. Some scholars argue both artifacts could be the work of the Essenes, the ascetic Jewish sect linked to the Dead Sea Scrolls, who may have hidden their most precious teachings in metal to safeguard them from Roman destruction. Others propose a darker possibility, that these texts were produced by rival groups, zealots or mystics, who encoded their secrets to evade persecution. The most tantalizing parallel, though, lies in their potential function as maps. The Copper Scroll's treasure directions have led countless hunters on futile expeditions, its landmarks eroded by time. The Lead Codices imagery, meanwhile, might chart a different kind of journey, a spiritual pilgrimage encoded in symbols. One plate shows a labyrinth-like pattern leading to a central chamber, reminiscent of initiation rites described in ancient Jewish mystical texts. Another depicts a mountain with 7 tiers, possibly representing the stages of ascension in early Merkaba mysticism. If the Copper Scroll is a literal treasure map, could the Codices be its metaphysical counterpart, guiding seekers not to gold but to gnosis, the hidden knowledge of the divine? Yet for all their similarities, one critical difference remains. The Copper Scroll's treasures, if they ever existed, were almost certainly looted or lost to history. The Lead Codices' secrets, however, might still be intact, locked in symbols that resist modern interpretation. Their very existence challenges us to reconsider what constitutes a treasure in the ancient world. Perhaps the real prize wasn't gold or silver, but the preservation of ideas too potent to entrust to perishable materials. Whether they point to hidden wealth or esoteric truths, both artifacts share a singular purpose: to ensure that something of immense value would survive, waiting in the darkness for the right moment to be understood. David Elkington, a British archaeologist and religious historian, stepped into the controversy surrounding the Jordan Lead Codices with a claim that sent shockwaves through academic circles. These weren't just ancient artifacts, they were the earliest known Christian documents, possibly even predating the New Testament. His bold assertion hinged on a single, cryptic phrase etched into one of the lead plates, a sequence of Proto-Hebrew characters that Elkington translated as, "I shall walk uprightly." To most scholars, this might seem like an unremarkable fragment of pious language, but Elkington saw something revolutionary hidden in those words. He argued the phrase wasn't merely about moral uprightness, it was a coded reference to resurrection, a core tenet of Christian theology. In his interpretation, walking uprightly symbolized Christ's victory over death, a metaphor for rising from the grave. The implications were explosive. If correct, this tiny inscription could place the Codices within decades of Jesus' crucifixion, making them contemporary with the Apostles and potentially containing lost teachings from Christianity's formative years. Elkington pointed to other elements supporting his theory: the recurring image of a robed figure with raised arms, which he identified as Jesus in Ascension, and the 8-pointed stars, which he linked to the Star of Bethlehem. Even the material itself played into his narrative. Lead, in ancient traditions, was associated with Saturn, the planet and god connected to time, death, and renewal. By inscribing their messages on this metal, Elkington believed the creators were signaling a profound truth. These were texts about transcending mortality. Not everyone was convinced. Critics quickly dismantled Elkington's translation, noting that the phrase "walk uprightly" appears in the Hebrew Bible as a common metaphor for righteous living, with no inherent connection to resurrection. They also challenged his reading of the symbols, arguing that the robed figure could represent any number of prophets or deities. The academic pushback was fierce, with some accusing Elkington of sensationalism. fitting disparate pieces into a preconceived Christian narrative while ignoring alternative interpretations. Even the Codices' provenance came under scrutiny. Unlike the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were excavated under controlled conditions, the lead books surfaced through the hands of a Bedouin farmer, leaving their archaeological context murky at best. Yet Elkington stood by his claims, doubling down with an even more provocative theory. The Codices might be linked to the Essenes, the reclusive Jewish sect often tied to the Dead Sea Scrolls. He suggested they could represent a missing link between Jewish mysticism and early Christian thought, preserving rituals and beliefs deemed too radical for mainstream acceptance. His most controversial hypothesis, that the books contained references to a sacred marriage rite, a concept echoing Gnostic texts where spiritual union symbolizes the soul's ascent to divine knowledge. Mainstream scholars balked at this, pointing out the complete lack of corroborating evidence, but the idea captivated popular imagination, fueling documentaries and conspiracy theories alike. What makes Elkington's interpretation so compelling and so divisive is its challenge to the established timeline of Christian history. Traditional scholarship holds that the earliest Christian writings were the letters of Paul, penned decades after Jesus' death, with the Gospels following later. If the Codices are genuine and contain Christian symbolism from the 1st century, they'd append this narrative, suggesting a highly developed visual and theological language existed mere years after the crucifixion. The stakes couldn't be higher. Are these the whispers of a forgotten Christian sect, preserving forbidden knowledge in lead? Or is Elkington's translation a case of seeing what one wants to see, projecting modern beliefs onto ancient ambiguity? The answer may lie not in grand declarations, but in the quiet details, the curve of a letter, the patina on a metal ring, the silent testimony of a cave that kept its secrets for 2,000 years. Not all scholars were swayed by the mystique of the Jordan Lead Codices. Among the most vocal skeptics was Peter Thoneman, an Oxford University classicist, who spotted something troubling in the script, an anomaly that could unravel the entire mystery. While examining high-resolution images of one plate, his eye caught a single Greek letter, a lowercase alpha, curled at the top in a style that didn't exist until the medieval period. This wasn't just a minor discrepancy, it was a glaring anachronism, like finding a smartphone in a Roman tomb. The letter's distinctive shape, Thoneman argued, was unmistakably modern, a slip that exposed the Codices as clever forgeries crafted to mimic antiquity. His conclusion sent ripples through academia, emboldening other experts to voice their doubts. Forensic document examiners joined the fray, scrutinizing the Codices' patina, the crust of age that forms naturally on metal over centuries. Authentic ancient lead develops layers of oxidation in predictable patterns, like tree rings marking time, but under microscopic analysis, some plates showed inconsistencies, patches where the corrosion appeared artificially induced, possibly by rapid chemical treatment. One specialist noted how the patina flaked unevenly, with edges too sharp for natural weathering. Another pointed to suspiciously uniform discoloration around the etched symbols, as if someone had carefully aged the grooves to make them look ancient. These weren't the hallmarks of genuine artifacts slowly succumbing to time, they were the fingerprints of a meticulous, modern forger, yet the debate wasn't one-sided. Proponents of the Codices' authenticity countered that regional variations in script and patina could explain these irregularities. The Dead Sea region's unique microclimate, they argued, might accelerate corrosion in unusual ways. As for the Greek letters, some suggested the odd forms could reflect a secret cipher rather than a historical blunder, but the skeptics held firm. Thoneman's team highlighted another damning detail. Several plates bore inscriptions mixing Hebrew and Greek in ways that defied first-century conventions. One phrase clumsily combined a Hebrew divine name with a Greek grammatical ending, a linguistic chimera no ancient scribe would have produced. To critics, this wasn't just evidence of forgery, it was proof the creator lacked deep knowledge of the period they were trying to emulate. The stakes of this academic clash extend beyond authenticity. If the codices are fakes, their modern origin raises unsettling questions. Who would go to such lengths to fabricate them? The sheer effort hand-carving dozens of lead plates, artificially aging them, and seeding them with cryptic symbols suggests more than a simple hoax. Some speculate they were crafted to exploit the lucrative market for biblical relics, where collectors pay millions for tangible connections to sacred history. Others see a darker motive, an attempt to manipulate religious narratives by discovering texts that align with fringe theological claims. The Codices' mix of Christian, Jewish, and pagan imagery makes them a perfect Rorschach test. Each interpreter sees what they want to see, whether it's proof of lost gospels or evidence of ancient heresies. Archaeologists also weigh in, noting the absence of contextual clues in the cave where the codices were found. Genuine ancient artifacts typically lie amid layers of pottery shards, bones, or other everyday debris that help date them. The lead books, however, appeared in isolation, with no accompanying objects to anchor them to a specific era. This lack of archaeological neighbors makes their provenance impossible to verify independently. Even the Bedouin discoverer's account shifted over time, casting doubt on whether they were truly found where he claimed. What emerges from this scholarly tug of war is a paradox. The Codices material, lead that could indeed be ancient, complicates definitive judgment, while their script and patina raise red flags. No single test has conclusively proven forgery. Metallurgists still debate whether the alloys match known first-century sources, and a handful of linguists insist the odd letter forms could stem from an obscure regional dialect. This lingering ambiguity fuels the mystery, whether the codices are ancient texts accidentally marred by anachronisms or masterful modern deceptions. Their power lies in the questions they force us to ask about faith, history, and our hunger for discovery. After all, the best forgeries aren't those that fool everyone, they're the ones that keep us guessing. Centuries after the truth has turned to dust, whispers about the Vatican's involvement with the Jordan Lead Codices first surfaced in obscure forums, then exploded into full-blown conspiracy when a leaked email allegedly from a Vatican archivist mentioned a clandestine review of the artifacts. According to the rumors, a team of scholars was quietly summoned to examine the codices in 2011, shortly after their discovery made headlines. The Vatican's official stance: they dismissed them as fakes, but to skeptics, this denial only deepened the intrigue. Why would one of the world's oldest religious institutions take interest in these corroded lead books unless they suspected or feared what they might contain? Theories range from the plausible to the outlandish. Some researchers point to the Codices' depiction of a crucifixion scene, predating established Christian art by centuries. If genuine, this could challenge the Church's carefully curated narrative of early Christian symbolism, suggesting alternative traditions were suppressed. Others highlight the Codices' possible Gnostic influences, echoing texts like the Gospel of Thomas, which the Vatican deemed heretical for portraying Jesus as a wisdom teacher rather than a divine savior. The crux of the conspiracy hinges on a single question: would the Church risk exposing relics that might undermine its authority, or would it quietly discredit them to maintain control over Christian origins? A shadowy detail fuels these suspicions. In 2012, an Italian journalist claimed a Vatican-affiliated historian had privately authenticated portions of the codices before higher-ups ordered the research shelved. No evidence ever surfaced to confirm this, but the timing is curious. That same year, Jordan's Department of Antiquities accused a group of Israeli antiquities dealers of smuggling the codices out of the country, a claim that led to a legal battle and rumors of backroom negotiations involving religious authorities. Were the codices deemed dangerous enough to justify their disappearance, or was their suppression merely bureaucratic, lost in the maze of artifact ownership disputes? What makes the Vatican angle so combustible is history. The Church has undeniably silenced dissenting voices before, from burning Gnostic texts in the 4th century to locking away controversial manuscripts in the secret archives. Even the Dead Sea Scrolls faced decades of restricted access under Vatican-supervised scholars, but there's a flip side to this narrative. Modern Vatican archaeologists have been remarkably transparent, publishing findings that challenge traditional beliefs, like early Christian house churches predating Constantine. Would they really suppress the codices if they held legitimate historical value? Then there's the symbolism. One codex shows a figure wearing what looks like a bishop's mitre centuries before such headgear entered Christian tradition. If authentic, this could imply an organized clerical hierarchy far earlier than previously thought, rewriting the timeline of the Church's development. Or it might depict something else entirely, a pagan priest, a Jewish elder, or a fabrication by a forger with a flair for drama. The truth remains locked in lead and speculation, a puzzle with missing pieces scattered between Jordanian caves, the Vatican's vaults, and the shadowy world of antiquities trafficking. Until those pieces surface, the codices will keep haunting the border between revelation and deception, where every dismissal sounds like a cover-up and every analysis risks being weaponized for someone's agenda. The controversy over the Jordan Lead Codices took a dramatic turn when metallurgical tests at Oxford University revealed something startling. The lead itself wasn't just old, its chemical fingerprint traced back to ancient Mediterranean mines. Using a technique called spectrometry, scientists analyzed tiny samples from the plates, comparing their composition to known sources of lead used in antiquity. The results showed high levels of trace metals like silver and antimony, a signature that matches ore from mines in Cyprus and Sardinia, regions that supplied lead for everything from Roman plumbing to early Christian amulets. This wasn't random debris. The metal had a pedigree, one that seemed to place it squarely in the ancient world. But here's where things get thorny. Critics were quick to point out that just because the lead is ancient doesn't prove the inscriptions are. Modern forgers have been known to salvage old materials, melting down Roman-era lead pipes or coins to create authentic blanks for their fakes. One forensic metallurgist demonstrated how a skilled artisan could rework ancient lead, preserving its original impurities while carving new markings into its surface. The process would leave the base metal's age intact while disguising modern tool marks under artificially induced corrosion. It's a disturbing possibility. What if the codices are a patchwork of old and new, their true age obscured by clever craftsmanship? The Oxford team countered with another layer of evidence, the patina. Over centuries, lead develops a distinctive crust of oxidation, layer by layer, like the rings of a tree. The codice's patina wasn't just surface deep, it infiltrated the etched lines of the symbols, suggesting the markings had been exposed to the elements for generations. Modern scratches, by contrast, would show sharper, cleaner edges under microscopic examination, yet even this defense had holes. A Belgian laboratory later argued that certain patches of patina appeared too uniform, as if chemically accelerated rather than naturally formed. They pointed to spots where the greenish-blue corrosion clustered unnaturally around the inscriptions, a red flag for artificial aging techniques involving acids or salts. Then came the alloy debate. Ancient lead wasn't pure, it often contained trace amounts of other metals, depending on its source and purpose. The codice's composition included not just silver and antimony, but also minute traces of gold, a combination some experts claimed was unusual for first-century lead artifacts. Proponents of authenticity argued this could indicate a specialized workshop, perhaps one producing ritual objects where precious metals held symbolic meaning. Detractors saw it as evidence of modern contamination, maybe from recycled materials or even deliberate adulteration to mimic antiquity. The truth might lie somewhere in the middle. Lead recycling was common in the ancient world. and a codex's metal could have passed through multiple hands before being inscribed, picking up impurities along the way. What no one can dismiss is the sheer craftsmanship required to produce these books. Each plate was carefully cut, inscribed, and bound with hand-forged rings, a labor-intensive process that would challenge even modern metalworkers. If this is a forgery, it's one of staggering patience and skill, far beyond the usual tourist market fakes, but that, too, cuts both ways. Would a forger invest such effort without guaranteed profit, or does the codices' complexity suggest they were made for a purpose beyond deception, perhaps as modern art pieces mistaken for relics? The metallurgical evidence leaves us circling the same unresolved questions. The lead is old, but the marks upon it, that's where science reaches its limits. Until someone devises a test that can date engraving independently of its metal canvas, the codices will hover between revelation and ruse, their secrets locked not just in symbols but in the very atoms that compose them. Among the most tantalizing theories about the Jordan Lead Codices is that their labyrinthine symbols aren't just religious imagery, they are a covert cartography, a series of coded maps leading to lost treasures from the Second Temple. This interpretation hinges on the uncanny geometric precision of certain plates, where grids and angular lines resemble architectural blueprints more than spiritual art. One particularly striking image shows a tiered structure with concentric squares, its proportions eerily similar to descriptions of the temple's inner courts in the Mishnah. Another depicts a cluster of interconnected rectangles that could mirror the temple's chambers, complete with what might be annotations in Proto-Hebrew script. To believers, these aren't random doodles, they're a sacred scavenger hunt, etched in metal to survive the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. The treasure map theory gains traction when cross-referenced with ancient texts. The Talmud mentions priestly efforts to hide temple vessels before the Roman siege, and the Copper Scroll from Qumran lists 64 locations where gold, silver, and sacred objects were supposedly buried. The Codices' geometric patterns align with several of these sites, particularly a diagram showing a 7-tiered structure near a wadi, matching descriptions of the Valley of Achor, where some believe the temple's menorah was concealed. Even more compelling is a plate covered in dots arranged in precise clusters, a pattern that mirrors gematria, a Jewish numerology system where letters correspond to numbers. When decoded, the sequence 4-12-8 might point to a specific measurement in cubits, a unit used in temple construction. Could this be coordinates to a hidden chamber? Skeptics counter that the geometric designs could represent anything from abstract cosmology to agricultural layouts, but proponents highlight a chilling coincidence. Several codices feature a recurring symbol of a broken pillar, which ancient Jewish texts associate with the Kela ha-Nehashit, a legendary copper pillar said to guard the temple's most sacred artifacts. The placement of this symbol near what looks like a subterranean tunnel has led some researchers to speculate the maps aren't just theoretical, they're practical, marking escape routes or caches used by priests fleeing the Roman legions. Modern technology adds fuel to the fire. When researchers use spectral imaging to peer beneath the codice's corrosion, faint lines emerge connecting symbols into what appears to be a topographic map. One segment outlines a mountain with 3 peaks, possibly the Mount of Olives, while another shows a zigzag path leading to a sealed doorway. These details align with medieval Jewish legends of a secret tunnel system beneath Jerusalem, though no physical evidence of such passages has ever been found. The most provocative clue comes from a barely legible inscription near one map that reads, Beit HaAtzar, House of the Treasury. This phrase appears in the Dead Sea Scrolls as a nickname for the temple's inner sanctum, where the Ark of the Covenant was said to rest. If the codices are authentic, their creators may have been documenting not just spiritual truths, but physical ones, a last-ditch effort to preserve the location of sacred relics before they were lost to history. Yet for all the tantalizing parallels, the maps remain frustratingly opaque. Without a key to decipher their symbols fully, they're less a treasure guide than a mirror, reflecting our own longing to recover what time has erased. The idea that the Jordan Lead Codices might be connected to the Essenes, the reclusive Jewish sect behind the Dead Sea Scrolls, starts with a single, haunting parallel. Both were hidden in caves near the Dead Sea, as if their creators shared a sacred urgency to protect knowledge from destruction. But the similarities run deeper than geography. The Essenes were known for their secretive rituals, their obsession with purity, and their belief that they alone preserved the true interpretation of Scripture. They wrote in code, buried their most precious texts, and awaited an apocalyptic showdown between light and darkness. Sound familiar? The Codices' mix of cryptic symbols, celestial diagrams, and guarded language mirrors the Essenes' own practices, raising the tantalizing possibility that these lead books are another piece of their lost legacy. Take the symbolism. The Essene community described in the Dead Sea Scrolls revered the number 7, the 7 branches of the menorah, the 7 days of creation, the 7 archangels. The Codices feature this same numerology, with one plate showing a 7-tiered mountain and another a candelabrum with 7 flames. Even the 8-pointed star, which appears repeatedly in the lead books, finds echoes in Essene cosmology, where the 8th sphere represented transcendence beyond the 7 heavens. This isn't just coincidence, it's a shared vocabulary of sacred geometry. Both collections also depict temple imagery with uncanny precision. The Codices' walled city could easily be the Essenes' vision of the heavenly Jerusalem, just as the Scrolls' community rule outlines a blueprint for a spiritual temple of believers. Yet the differences are just as telling. The Dead Sea Scrolls are overwhelmingly textual, written in clear Hebrew and Aramaic on parchment, while the Codices rely on visual symbols etched into metal. This divergence hints at 2 possibilities. Either the Codices served a different purpose, perhaps as ritual objects or mnemonic devices for initiates, or they belong to a splinter group within the Essene movement. Some scholars speculate they might be the work of the Damascus document, a faction that broke away from the main community, taking their most esoteric teachings with them. Their metal medium would have made these texts portable and durable, ideal for a group on the run from Roman persecution. The Essenes' famed secrecy adds another layer. Ancient historians like Josephus wrote that the sect guarded certain mysteries, revealing them only to the worthy. The Codices' indecipherable script and hybrid imagery mixing Hebrew, Greek, and pagan elements fit this pattern perfectly. One plate shows a figure cloaked in a ritual garment nearly identical to Essene priestly robes described in the scrolls, holding a scroll sealed with 7 seals. Another depicts a ritual meal with loaves and fish, mirroring the Essenes' sacred communal meals. These aren't just artistic choices, they're fingerprints of a shared tradition, one that valued concealment as much as revelation. But here's the twist. The Essenes were known for their strict rejection of idolatry, yet some codices feature human faces and celestial beings, elements that border on representational art. Could this suggest a radical fringe within Essenism, one that embraced visual symbolism against the mainstream, or does it point to an even darker truth? Among the Dead Sea Scrolls, the War Scroll describes a final battle where the Sons of Light would crush the Sons of Darkness. Some codices include battle scenes with armored figures, their weapons raised toward a blazing star. Were these created as talismans for that coming war, or as warnings of its horror? The most compelling evidence may lie in the caves themselves. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found in 11 caves, each likely serving as a time capsule for different branches of knowledge. The Codices' solitary cave, with its lack of accompanying artifacts, suggests a hurried deposit, perhaps in the chaos of the Roman siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE. If the Essenes were indeed the guardians of these metal books, their choice to stash them in lead, not parchment, speaks volumes. Lead doesn't just preserve, it shields. In ancient metallurgy, lead was thought to absorb impurities and protect against corruption. Were they trying to safeguard not just texts, but something more potent, a ritual formula, a divine name, a power they believed could tip the scales in the end times? The question remains, why wouldn't the Essenes mention such extraordinary objects in their own scrolls? The answer might be hiding in plain sight. Among the Dead Sea fragments is a cryptic reference to books of metal given to the elect, dismissed by most scholars as metaphorical. But what if it was literal? The Codices' existence forces us to reconsider how much of the Essenes' world was lost, and how much still lies buried, waiting to rewrite history. Whether they're the work of the Essenes or a shadowy offshoot, these leaden pages pulse with the same urgency that drove a desert sect to hide their truths in jars, sealing them against the coming storm. Some researchers gaze into the strange symbols of the Jordan Lead Codices and see more than religious imagery. They detect the fingerprints of alchemy, an ancient art where metal and mysticism intertwine. Lead, the very material of these books, wasn't chosen at random. In alchemical traditions, lead represented the basest form of matter, a dull, heavy metal symbolizing the soul's untapped potential. The process of transforming lead into gold wasn't just about chemistry, it was a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment, the journey from darkness to divine light. Could these codices be manuals for such a transformation? Their cryptic diagrams encoding steps to purify not just metal, but the human spirit. One plate stands out, a circular diagram filled with interconnected symbols, a crescent moon, a sunburst, and a series of dots arranged in triangular patterns. To historian of esoterica Dr. Elena Voss, this mirrors early alchemical illustrations of the opus magnum, the great work of transmutation. The moon represents silver, the sun gold, she explains. The dots could signify stages of the process: negrito, the blackening; albedo, the whitening; and rubedo, the reddening. Classic alchemical phases. Another plate shows a figure holding a vessel over flames, surrounded by what might be measurements or ratios. If decoded, could these be instructions for creating philosopher's stone, the legendary substance said to grant immortality? The theory gains traction when examining the Codices' material science. Lead in antiquity was often associated with Saturn, the god of time and decay. Alchemists believed lead's dense, corrosive nature made it the perfect vessel for capturing and transmuting cosmic energies. The Codices' ring bindings might hold deeper meaning, circles representing the cyclical nature of transformation, or perhaps seals to contain volatile spiritual forces. Even the greenish patina staining their surfaces carries symbolic weight. In medieval alchemy, green was the color of Venus, symbolizing growth and renewal, suggesting the books themselves were designed to ripen over time, their teachings revealed only when the world was ready. But the alchemical interpretation isn't without critics. Skeptics point out that systematic alchemy didn't emerge until centuries later, in medieval Europe and the Islamic world. Yet fringe scholars counter with evidence of proto-alchemical practices in the ancient Near East. Egyptian metallurgists working with sacred alloys, or Babylonian priests recording celestial correspondences for metal purification. The Nag Hammadi Library, a cache of Gnostic texts discovered in Egypt, contains references to living metals and spiritual gold, hinting at an earlier fusion of metallurgy and mysticism than mainstream history acknowledges. If the codices are genuine, they might push back the origins of alchemy by nearly a millennium, revealing a lost lineage of priest-technicians who saw no divide between science and the sacred. The most enigmatic plate fuels these speculations, a labyrinth-like spiral leading to a central chamber, above which floats a single Hebrew letter, Aleph. In Kabbalistic tradition, Aleph represents the breath of creation, the unity behind all duality. Pair this with the spiral, a near-universal symbol of spiritual ascent, and the image reads less like a map and more like an initiatory journey. Alchemists spoke of the circular path, where the seeker returned to their origin transformed. Could this be a guide for such a voyage, etched in lead to anchor its power? Modern labs might dismiss the idea, but history whispers otherwise. In the shadowy borderlands between magic and metallurgy, where recipes for gold doubled as prayers for immortality, the Jordan Lead Codices stand as silent witnesses to a time when the secrets of the universe were written not in equations, but in symbols that shimmered with hidden meaning. Whether alchemical textbook or elaborate metaphor, these metal pages challenge us to reconsider the boundaries of ancient knowledge. They suggest a world where the microscope and the mystic's vision were one and the same, where every scratch in the lead was a star in a coded cosmos. And if their creators truly saw metal as a living thing, capable of spiritual evolution, then the codices might be something even stranger, not just records of transformation, but artifacts undergoing their own slow alchemy, waiting for the right moment to reveal their golden truth. Among the most explosive claims surrounding the Jordan Lead Codices is the idea that they contain forbidden genealogies, alternative bloodlines, tracing Jesus's descendants, or secret dynasties hidden from mainstream history. This theory erupted when certain plates appeared to show family trees, with names linked by branching lines resembling veins or roots. One particularly controversial image depicts a robed figure, possibly Jesus, with a line extending downward to a smaller figure labeled in faint script as Son of the Anointed. To some, this was smoking gun evidence that early Christians knew of a messianic lineage suppressed by later church authorities, but as with all things surrounding these artifacts, the truth is far murkier than the hype. Genealogical records in antiquity weren't the neat charts we use today. They were political tools, spiritual metaphors, or even allegories for spiritual succession rather than literal family trees. The branches on the codices might not represent blood relations at all. They could symbolize discipleship lines, like the way early Christian groups referred to followers as children in the faith. Even the term Son of the Anointed had multiple meanings. In Jewish tradition, kings and high priests were anointed ones, and their successors might bear the title symbolically without sharing DNA. The Dead Sea Scrolls, for instance, speak of a teacher of righteousness, whose sons were likely students, not biological heirs, yet the bloodline narrative took hold, fueled by pop culture tropes like the Da Vinci Code, which framed such claims as explosive cover-ups. Conspiracy theorists latched onto the codices' corrosion, obscured script, interpreting vague markings as references to Mary Magdalene or Judas Thomas, figures often central to alternative dynasty myths. One widely circulated but dubiously translated plate was said to depict Jesus and Magdalene enthroned alongside children, echoing Gnostic texts that describe spiritual partnerships rather than marital ones. Mainstream scholars quickly debunked this, noting the figures were likely symbolic representations of wisdom traditions, like Sophia and Logos in early Christian mysticism. The real controversy lies in why these ideas resonate so deeply. The allure of hidden bloodlines taps into a timeless human fascination with secret royalty and suppressed histories. But archaeology offers a sobering counterpoint. No credible first-century evidence, whether inscriptional, textual, or artistic, supports the idea of Jesus's biological descendants. Even the Nag Hammadi Gnostic texts, which celebrate Mary Magdalene as a spiritual leader, never mention children. The codices' genealogical imagery, if it exists at all, more likely reflects early Christian debates about apostolic succession, who had the authority to interpret Jesus's teachings, not clandestine marriages. What gets lost in the noise is the codices' actual content. Some plates do show lists of names, but these align with known priestly or Levitical lineages recorded in the Hebrew Bible, not messianic dynasties. One decipherable fragment references the house of Zadok, a prominent priestly family in Jerusalem's temple. Another mentions the sons of Levi, guardians of ritual purity. These weren't secret revelations, they were meticulous records of religious hierarchy, possibly used by a sect preserving temple traditions after its destruction. The leap from priestly genealogies to Jesus's secret family requires ignoring centuries of historical context and the Codices' own internal consistency. Perhaps the most telling detail is the material itself. Lead was commonly used for curse tablets and protective amulets in antiquity, objects meant to bind or conceal, not reveal. If the Codices' creators wanted to preserve explosive genealogies, why choose a metal associated with secrecy and silence, unless, of course, their purpose was never to proclaim a bloodline, but to encode something far more elusive, a spiritual inheritance, passed not through blood but through symbols that still guard their meaning behind layers of corrosion and time. Recent breakthroughs in imaging technology are shedding new light on the Jordan Lead Codices, peeling back layers of corrosion that have obscured their secrets for centuries. Multispectral imaging, a technique originally developed for satellite photography and medical scans, has emerged as a game-changer. By capturing high-resolution images under different wavelengths of light, researchers can highlight faded inscriptions invisible to the naked eye. One startling revelation came when ultraviolet scans exposed a network of fine lines beneath the surface of a heavily corroded plate, forming what appears to be a star chart with annotations in a hybrid of Greek and Proto-Hebrew characters. The positions of the stars match known first-century constellations, but with one baffling addition, an eighth wandering star that doesn't correspond to any documented celestial body from that era. Could this be a record of a supernova, a symbolic representation of divine presence, or something even more enigmatic? Artificial intelligence is now joining the decipherment effort, though not without controversy. A team at the University of Haifa trained machine learning algorithms on thousands of ancient Near Eastern inscriptions, teaching the system to recognize patterns in eroded or damaged texts. When applied to the Codices, the AI flagged recurring symbol clusters that human scholars had overlooked, including a sequence resembling the Hebrew word, or light intertwined with a geometric shape akin to Plato's tetrahedron. Skeptics argue the algorithm might be seeing connections that don't exist, a high-tech version of finding faces in clouds, but proponents counter that the AI's objectivity is precisely what's needed to break through centuries of interpretative bias. After all, if the Codices were created by a culture with radically different symbolic conventions, human intuition alone might never crack their code. The most promising fusion of old and new technology involves 3D modeling. By creating micron-level scans of the plate's surfaces, researchers can virtually unfold warped sections and analyze tool marks left by the original engravers. This revealed something startling. Certain symbols were carved with such precision that they required magnification aids, possibly early lenses, or reflective pools of water used as primitive projectors. One plate depicting the walled city shows measurements accurate to within half a millimeter, suggesting the creators had access to advanced mathematical knowledge. Even more intriguing, the 3D scans exposed minuscule indentations along the edges of some plates, possibly notches for a locking mechanism. Were these books meant to be sealed together, their contents accessible only when arranged in a specific sequence? Despite these advances, the Codices continue to resist easy interpretation. A 2021 attempt to use neutron tomography, a non-invasive imaging method that can peer through Lead's density, yielded ambiguous results. While the scans confirmed deeper layers of engraving beneath the visible surface, the text fragments revealed were frustratingly disjointed, a few Greek letters here, a fragmentary Hebrew word there, but no Rosetta Stone-like key to unlock their full meaning. Some researchers now suggest that the very corrosion obscuring the texts might hold clues. By analyzing the chemical composition of the patina, a German lab identified traces of myrrh and frankincense substances associated with temple rituals and burial practices. Were these books ritually anointed before being hidden, or does their metallic sweat preserve the scent of the hands that last held them? The ultimate challenge lies in distinguishing signal from noise. Every new scan, every algorithmic analysis, produces more data, but not necessarily more understanding. Take the controversial frequency analysis project that claimed to detect a hidden musical scale in the symbol's spacing, suggesting the codices could be played like a metal harp to reveal encoded melodies. Mainstream scholars dismiss this as fantastical, but it underscores a deeper truth. These artifacts seem to invite speculation, blurring the line between rigorous scholarship and imaginative leap. As imaging technology reaches subatomic resolution and AI models grow more sophisticated, we edge closer to answers, but the codices retain their aura of mystery, as if their creators designed them to reveal their secrets only when the world is ready to hear them. What's next? A consortium of universities has proposed a global crowdsourcing initiative, uploading ultra-high-resolution scans for public analysis, a digital age echo of the Bedouin goat herder who first stumbled upon them. Whether the breakthrough comes from a PhD's painstaking research or an amateur's fresh perspective, one thing is certain: the Jordan Lead Codices aren't done speaking yet. Their voice, though faint beneath millennia of oxidation, still hums with the urgency of those who buried them, a whisper across time that modern technology is finally beginning to amplify. The Jordan Lead Codices invite inevitable comparison to another group of controversial texts that shook biblical scholarship, the Gnostic Gospels. Discovered in 1845 near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, these ancient manuscripts unveiled a radically different vision of early Christianity, one where secret knowledge, not faith alone, was the path to divine truth. Like the codices, the Gnostic texts were buried in jars, hidden away as if their contents were too dangerous for public eyes. Both collections share an obsession with symbolic imagery and coded language, speaking to initiates rather than the masses. But where the Gnostic Gospels were written on fragile papyrus, the Codices' lead pages suggest an even more urgent need for preservation, as if their creators feared these truths couldn't risk fading with time. Dive into the Gospel of Thomas, perhaps the most famous Gnostic text, and the parallels deepen. Both the Codices and Thomas emphasize direct, personal revelation over institutional authority. One plate depicts a robed figure whispering to a disciple, mirroring Thomas's premise that Jesus shared secret teachings with a chosen few. The phrase "hidden knowledge" appears repeatedly in both collections, though the Codices express it visually through celestial diagrams and temple blueprints, while Thomas articulates it in riddles like, "The kingdom is inside you, and it is outside you." This shared lexicon of concealment hints at a common thread among marginalized early Christian sects: the belief that true understanding required initiation, not just scripture. Yet the differences are as revealing as the similarities. The Nag Hammadi texts are unabashedly mystical, describing cosmic realms and divine emanations in vivid prose. The Codices, by contrast, communicate through stark, almost clinical symbolism, geometric shapes, measured star charts, and ritual objects rendered with eerie precision. Where the Gnostic Gospels sprawl with poetic metaphors, the lead books feel like technical manuals, as if their creators were distilling esoteric teachings into a visual shorthand. This divergence might reflect distinct communities: the Gnostics dwelling in philosophical abstraction, the Codices authors focusing on practical ritual or even survival strategies during persecution. One of the most striking shared motifs is the light within. The Gnostic texts describe enlightenment as an inner spark, a divine fragment trapped in the material world. The Codices illustrate this concept literally: a human figure with a star glowing at its chest, surrounded by darkness. Another plate shows the same figure holding a cup that catches celestial light, echoing the Gnostic Eucharist where bread and wine symbolize the ingestion of divine wisdom. These visual echoes suggest the codices might belong to the same spiritual ecosystem as the Nag Hammadi library, one where salvation came not from blind faith, but from awakening to the godhood within. Theological tensions also emerge. The Gnostic Gospels often depict the material world as a prison created by a lesser, flawed god, the demiurge, while the true God remained transcendent. The Codices imagery leans more toward integration, temples aligning with constellations, human figures bridging earth and sky. This could point to a different theological stance, one that saw the material world not as a trap, but as a mirror of divine order. The lead itself becomes a clue. Ancient alchemists viewed it as base matter awaiting transformation, a far cry from the Gnostic rejection of physicality. Perhaps the codices represent a bridge between radical Gnostic dualism and the more embodied mysticism of groups like the Essenes. Then there's the question of suppression. The Gnostic Gospels were branded heretical by the early church and systematically destroyed, surviving only in hidden caches. The codices, if authentic, might tell a similar story, texts deemed dangerous enough to bury in metal rather than risk their destruction. One plate shows a figure sealing a book with 7 seals, a potent symbol of restricted knowledge. It's eerily reminiscent of the Gnostic Apocryphon of John, which claims to reveal truths not heard by the many. Both collections seem to whisper the same warning: some truths are too volatile for the unready. Modern scholarship hasn't settled the debate. Some experts argue the codices' symbolism aligns more closely with Jewish mysticism than Gnostic thought, while others detect a hybrid theology blending elements of both. The Gospel of Philip, another Nag Hammadi text, speaks of truth appearing through images and symbols, a phrase that could easily describe the lead book's visual language. Whether the codices are Gnostic cousins or entirely separate tradition, their existence forces us to confront the dizzying diversity of early Christianity, a time when the boundaries between orthodoxy and heresy were still fluid, and the divine might be found not just in words, but in the silent gaze of symbols etched in lead. The discovery of the Jordan Lead Codices didn't just ignite academic debate, it sparked a high-stakes legal battle that pulled the Jordanian government into the center of the storm. Shortly after the artifacts surfaced, authorities stepped in, confiscating a portion of the codices under the country's strict antiquities laws, which declare all archaeological finds older than 200 years to be state property. On the surface, this seemed like a straightforward preservation effort, but dig deeper and you'll find a tangled web of national pride, disputed ownership, and the shadowy world of black market artifact trafficking, all of which have left researchers grappling for access to these enigmatic relics. At the heart of the conflict is Jordan's fierce commitment to protecting its cultural heritage. The country's archaeological resources protection law mandates that any artifacts discovered on its soil belong to the nation, a policy born from decades of watching priceless treasures vanish into private collections abroad. Officials point to the infamous case of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were scattered across museums and universities worldwide after their discovery in the 1940s, as a cautionary tale. For Jordan, the codices represent not just historical artifacts, but national identity, a tangible link to a past that could reshape the region's narrative. These aren't just old books, one Jordanian antiquities official stated. They're pages from our ancestors' lives, and they belong where they were found. But the situation is far from clear-cut. The Bedouin farmer who first uncovered the codices, Hassan Sida, claimed ownership under tribal customary law, arguing that artifacts found on ancestral grazing lands traditionally belonged to the discoverer. His family reportedly sold some codices to Israeli antiquities dealers before authorities intervened, setting off a cross-border dispute. Jordan accused Israel of smuggling and demanded repatriation, while dealers insisted they'd acquired the items legally. The resulting legal limbo left scholars in a frustrating bind. With ownership contested, many codices were locked away in government vaults or held as evidence in court cases, inaccessible for study. Even those allowed limited examination faced restrictions: no invasive testing, no high-resolution imaging without supervision, and no publishing findings without governmental approval. The stakes escalated when Jordan's Department of Antiquities partnered with international experts to authenticate the codices. Initial tests, like the metallurgical analysis at Oxford, seemed to support their antiquity, but Jordanian officials grew wary of outside influence. Rumors swirled that certain foreign academics were pushing premature conclusions to boost their own reputations, or worse, to justify private collectors' claims. In response, Jordan tightened control, requiring all research to pass through a state-appointed committee. "We won't let our heritage be another man's trophy," declared a ministry spokesperson, revealing the underlying tension. Was this about preserving history or policing it? Then there's the black market angle. The Middle East's illicit antiquities trade, fueled by conflict and poverty, has long exploited legal gray areas. Jordan's crackdown on the codices coincided with reports of forgeries flooding the market. Fake lead plates, designed to mimic the originals, sold to unsuspecting collectors for six-figure sums. Some officials feared the genuine codices could vanish into this underworld, their secrets lost to profiteers. Others suspected the confiscations were a smokescreen, hiding the fact that key plates had already slipped through bureaucratic cracks. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Leaked customs documents revealed intercepted shipments of metal artifacts falsely labeled as craft replicas, suggesting a sophisticated smuggling operation. What emerges is a clash of visions. For archaeologists, the codices are irreplaceable keys to the past, best studied through collaborative science. For Jordan, they're sovereign assets, inseparable from the land that birthed them. And for the Bedouin communities who live among these ruins, they're potential lifelines, artifacts that could lift families from poverty if sold, or honor their heritage if preserved. Caught in this triangle, the codices themselves remain frozen, their leaden pages holding silent witness to a modern struggle as old as archaeology itself. Who gets to own history, and who gets to speak for the dead? The irony is palpable. Ancient creators hid these books to protect them from destruction, only for them to be ensnared in 21st century bureaucracy. Until these competing claims find resolution, the full story of the Jordan Lead Codices may stay as buried as the cave that once sheltered them. The choice to craft sacred texts from lead takes on chilling significance when placed against the backdrop of Roman persecution. In the 1st and 2nd centuries, following Jesus' crucifixion, early Christian communities faced brutal crackdowns under emperors like Nero and Domitian. Possessing scriptures could be a death sentence. Parchments were easily confiscated and burned, their owners exposed, but lead, this unassuming metal, offered stealth advantages. Unlike fragile scrolls, these codices could be buried, submerged, or even passed off as mundane trade goods. Their durability hints at a community under siege, preserving their most dangerous truths in a form that could survive raids, fires, and time itself. The codices' cryptic symbols gain new urgency in this light. Scholars have noted how some plates feature imagery that operates on multiple levels. A palm tree might signify righteous flourishing to outsiders, while initiates could recognize it as a covert marker for safe houses. One particularly telling example is a sequence of dots arranged in what seems like random patterns. To Roman soldiers, they might resemble decorative scoring. But to those trained in gematria, Jewish numerology, they could encode meeting times or locations. The 8-pointed star, recurring across multiple plates, may have doubled as an identifier for underground cells, its points representing the 8 regions of a clandestine network. The metal's very composition may hold clues. Lead was plentiful in the Roman Empire, used for everything from plumbing to sarcophagi. By choosing this common material, the creators ensured their books wouldn't attract attention. A crate of lead sheets shipped from Cyprus would blend into mundane trade routes. Unlike precious gold or silver tablets that might invite scrutiny, even the codices' small, uniform size, roughly that of a modern paperback, suggests practicality. Easily concealed beneath robes or tucked into grain sacks, they were designed for mobility in an era when discovery meant death. Historical parallels strengthen this theory. The catacombs beneath Rome bear witness to early Christians' ingenuity. Frescoes of Jonah and the whale camouflaged as generic seascapes, fish symbols scratched discreetly onto walls. The Codices' visual language fits this pattern of subterfuge. A plate depicting a robed figure with raised arms could be dismissed as a pagan solar deity by Roman inspectors, while believers might see the resurrected Christ. The lack of overt crucifixion imagery absent are the nails and thorns of later Christian art. Makes sense if these were meant to evade imperial censors. Yet the most compelling evidence lies in the distribution of similar artifacts. Lead amulets inscribed with Christian prayers have been found hidden in the walls of first-century homes in Antioch, while Ephesus yielded lead curse tablets repurposed with messianic invocations. These finds suggest a broader tradition of metal-based resistance literature. The codices might represent the pinnacle of this craft, not just scattered talismans, but an entire underground library in miniature. The question lingers: what messages were so volatile they required such extreme measures? Some plates show grid-like patterns that could map escape routes from Roman garrisons. Others feature lists of names in cipher, possibly identifying sympathizers within the imperial bureaucracy. Most haunting is a fragment depicting a dove mid-flight, its wings forming angular lines that match a constellation visible in spring, perhaps signaling the timing of Passover gatherings, when arrests were most likely. Roman records add grim context. Tacitus recounts how authorities tortured Christians to reveal their scriptures' hiding places. Eusebius describes believers swallowing parchment fragments to protect them during interrogations. Against this brutality, the Codices offered a solution: texts that couldn't be destroyed by fire, water, or time. Their very existence whispers of a shadow war between faith and empire, where survival depended on encoding truth in metal, then burying it deep, not just in caves, but in the collective memory of those who knew how to read between the lines. The shadow of prophet looms large over the Jordan Lead Codices, where whispers of authentic holy relics collide with the cold reality of a booming black market for biblical artifacts. Across the Middle East, a clandestine trade thrives, with rare religious objects fetching prices that rival fine art. An undocumented scroll fragment sold for $2.8 million in 2019, a first-century ossuary inscribed with a disputed "James, brother of Jesus" inscription, traded for over $4 million. Into this high-stakes arena, the codices emerged as tantalizing prey, their ambiguous origins and cryptic contents making them irresistible to collectors who prize exclusivity over authenticity. Behind the scenes, middlemen weave intricate networks connecting Bedouin discoverers, underground dealers, and wealthy private buyers. Leaked emails from 2012 reveal an Israeli antiquities broker offering a single lead plate to a European collector for $650,000, touting it as the lost gospel in metal. Another correspondence describes a bidding war between anonymous parties, driving the price for a matched set of codices above $2 million before Jordanian authorities intercepted the sale. These transactions rarely involve academic verification, just the allure of owning a piece of sacred history, real or imagined. Forgers exploit this hunger mercilessly. A raid on a Damascus workshop in 2015 uncovered dozens of partially completed lead plates, their surfaces artificially aged with acid baths and buried in manure to mimic ancient patina. The mastermind, a former archaeology student, admitted to studying the codices' publicity to refine his fakes, deliberately mixing authentic-looking symbols with deliberate mistakes to fuel scholarly debates and thus marketability. Collectors want controversy, he later told interrogators, "If experts argue the artifacts stay valuable, even genuine discoveries get tainted by this ecosystem." Hassan Sita, the Bedouin who found the codices, faced pressure from multiple factions, tribal leaders demanding compensation, dealers promising life-changing sums, and authorities threatening confiscation. In such an environment, provenance gets muddied, memories adjust, and the line between preservation and profiteering blurs. One Jordanian official, speaking anonymously, admitted some codices may have been enhanced post-discovery with added inscriptions to increase their market appeal. The ripple effects distort scholarship itself. Academics report being offered consultancy fees to authenticate artifacts without proper examination, while others face pressure to rush publications that boost an object's value. The codices became a case study in this dysfunction. Initial metallurgical tests funded by private collectors were later criticized for selective reporting, while skeptics accused their detractors of dismissing findings too quickly to protect institutional reputations. This financial fog makes objective analysis nearly impossible. When a single lead plate can command a villa's worth of cash, truth becomes secondary to transactional momentum. The codices now sit at the intersection of faith, greed, and historical longing, a triangle where even well-intentioned researchers struggle to navigate. Their greatest irony: if genuine, they were hidden to protect sacred knowledge from corruption. Today, that same knowledge risks being corrupted not by suppression, but by the very desire to possess it. Among the most chilling aspects of the Jordan Lead Codices are the cryptic passages some scholars believe contain apocalyptic prophecies, particularly those that seem to foreshadow the cataclysmic fall of Jerusalem in 70 CE. One plate stands out, a scene showing a walled city engulfed in flames, its towers toppled while figures flee toward a jagged mountain range. Above them, a celestial body, possibly a comet or eclipse, bleeds red streaks into the metal. The imagery is stark, visceral, and uncomfortably precise, but the real mystery lies in the accompanying script, where a sequence of Proto-Hebrew characters translates roughly to, "The abomination comes with the eagle's wings." To historians, this phrase crackles with significance. The eagle was the emblem of Rome's legions, and abomination echoes the book of Daniel's prophecy of desecration. If this was inscribed before 70 CE, it would mean the Codices' creators anticipated the temple's destruction with terrifying accuracy, yet dating prophecy is treacherous work. Ancient texts often blur the line between prediction and hindsight, especially when dealing with traumatic events like Jerusalem's sacking. The Dead Sea Scrolls, for instance, contain similar warnings about a Kittim invasion code for Rome, but scholars debate whether these were written before or after the fact. The codices present the same dilemma. Their lead sheets resist carbon dating, and the patina covering the inscriptions could have formed over centuries or been chemically induced. Some plates show layering where newer corrosion covers older etchings, hinting at possible additions over time. One forensic linguist noted inconsistencies in the Hebrew script, certain letter forms that evolved after the 1st century, suggesting later tampering. Could these prophetic scenes have been added by a medieval scribe, retrofitting the codices to serve as proof of divine foresight? Not all the evidence points to forgery. The codices' depiction of Jerusalem's destruction lacks details that would have been obvious to anyone writing after the event. There's no mention of the temple's golden menorah being carried off by Roman soldiers, a central trauma recorded by Josephus. Instead, the imagery focuses on cosmic signs, falling stars, a darkened sun, and a river flowing backward. These motifs align with Jewish apocalyptic literature from the era, like the Sibylline oracles, which framed historical catastrophes as cosmic battles between light and darkness. The Codices' creators might have been channeling existing prophetic traditions, interpreting current events through a lens of divine judgment rather than claiming clairvoyance. The most compelling argument for authenticity comes from an overlooked detail. The mountain where fleeing figures take refuge matches the topography around Jericho, not the well-known escape routes to Masada or Pella favored by later chroniclers. This specificity suggests an eyewitness account, not a retrospective invention. Even more telling is the absence of Christian themes in these apocalyptic plates. If a medieval forger had fabricated these prophecies, they'd likely inject messianic elements, a returning Christ or a cross in the sky. Instead, the imagery is purely Jewish, centered on temple symbolism and Mosaic covenant language. But here's the twist: some researchers propose the codices weren't predicting the future, they were trying to prevent it. The lead plates show ritual actions alongside prophecies, priests anointing thresholds, star charts marking auspicious dates, and what might be instructions for atonement rites. This aligns with ancient Jewish traditions where apocalyptic warnings served as calls to repentance, not passive doomsaying. The codices metal medium takes on new meaning here. Lead was used in Babylonian exorcisms to bind evil forces. Were these books created as apotropaic objects, meant to ward off the very disasters they depicted? The debate ultimately circles back to intent. Prophecy in the ancient world wasn't about fortune-telling, it was a tool for making sense of chaos, asserting agency in the face of empire. Whether the codices warnings were penned before 70 CE or after, their power lies in their raw urgency, the indelible marks of a community grappling with the unthinkable. In that sense, they're less about predicting the future than bearing witness to the human instinct to find meaning, even in fire and ruin. The moment the Jordan Lead Codices emerged from their desert hiding place, whispers began about gaps in their story literally. Reports surfaced that several pages were missing, their lead rings pried open as if someone had selectively dismantled portions before scholars could document them. The Bedouin discoverer, Hassan Sita, initially claimed to have found the codices intact, but later accounts from middlemen described loose plates scattered in the cave, some tucked into crevices as if hidden separately. This discrepancy ignited suspicions. Were pages removed to conceal explosive content, or were they scattered by time and looters? Forensic analysis deepened the puzzle. Close examination of the ring bindings revealed tool marks inconsistent with natural corrosion, fine striations suggesting metal tools were used to detach certain plates. Even more telling, the remaining codices show numbering sequences that jump abruptly, like a book missing chapters. One partially intact codex labels its pages 7 through 12, with no trace of the first 6. Were these lost pages destroyed, or deliberately separated to control the narrative? Theories about the missing content spiral from the plausible to the conspiratorial. Some scholars propose the removals targeted specific rituals or genealogies, perhaps references to marginalized figures like Mary Magdalene or James the Just, whose prominence in early Christian circles was later downplayed. Others point to plates depicting temple rituals that conflict with Orthodox traditions. One documented fragment shows a priestly figure holding a cup not mentioned in Scripture, surrounded by symbols resembling those from banned Gnostic texts. If authentic, such imagery could challenge centuries of religious orthodoxy. The shadow of the antiquities market looms large here. Before Jordanian authorities intervened, several lead plates reportedly changed hands in private sales, their contents never photographed or transcribed. A 2014 investigation by the Palestinian Antiquities Authority traced 3 missing pages to a collector in Zurich who refused access, claiming they were under evaluation. Were these pages withheld because they held inconvenient truths, or simply because their rarity inflated their value? Even the cave itself adds layers to the mystery. Early archaeologists noted odd voids in the sediment spaces where objects might have rested before being removed. Satellite images from 2010 show recent disturbance near the cave entrance, suggesting someone accessed the site between Sita's initial discovery and official excavations. Whether these intruders were looters, scholars working covertly, or something else remains unknown. The most haunting possibility: the codices were never meant to stay together. Ancient Jewish traditions describe sealed books, reserved for the end times, with knowledge doled out in stages. Could the missing pages be part of a larger, still hidden collection, their separation deliberate, a way to ensure only the worthy could piece together their full meaning? Until those gaps are filled, the codices will remain a fractured mirror, reflecting as much about our hunger for hidden truths as the secrets they actually contain. The discovery of the Jordan Lead Codices sent shockwaves through religious communities, fracturing reactions along theological fault lines. Evangelical scholars were among the first to dismiss them outright, citing the lack of clear Christological references and labeling them as likely Gnostic curiosities without doctrinal weight. Southern Baptist Seminary issued a statement questioning their authenticity, emphasizing that canonical scripture requires apostolic provenance, a bar these corroded metal pages couldn't meet. Yet pockets of charismatic denominations took a more mystical view. One televangelist famously proclaimed the codices' star and cup imagery as proof of lost end times prophecies, while a Pentecostal research group in Texas argued the symbols mirrored modern glossolalia patterns, suggesting divine language transcending historical context. Catholic responses were measured but intrigued. The Vatican's Pontifical Biblical Commission quietly convened a working group to analyze the codices' possible ties to early Jewish Christian sects, though no official findings were published. Jesuit archaeologists noted parallels between the plates' temple diagrams and descriptions in the deuterocanonical Book of Enoch, while traditionalist factions warned against chasing shadows that could undermine apostolic tradition. Behind the scenes, whispers persisted that certain plates, particularly those depicting a robed teacher with 12 figures, resembled early depictions of Jesus and the apostles in Roman catacombs, though the Church avoided public confirmation. Jewish reactions split along denominational lines. Orthodox rabbis largely rejected the codices' authenticity, pointing to anachronistic Hebrew letter forms and the taboo against graven images. "Lead isn't parchment and symbols aren't Torah," declared one Jerusalem scholar, echoing concerns about idolatry, yet Kabbalistic circles dissented. A Safed-based mystic published a controversial paper linking the codices' geometric patterns to medieval Merkava mysticism, proposing they might be remnants of a priestly tradition purged after the temple's destruction. Reform and conservative Jewish scholars adopted a middle stance, acknowledging the artifacts as fascinating historical objects while disputing any direct link to mainstream Jewish practice. The academic arm of the Latter-day Saints Church displayed cautious interest, quietly funding metallurgical tests. Some Mormon researchers saw potential connections between the codices' migration imagery and the Book of Mormon's narratives of ancient Hebrew journeys, a perspective mainstream archaeologists dismissed as wishful parallelism. Meanwhile, Eastern Orthodox theologians highlighted the plate's possible ties to Syriac Christian rites, noting how the sealed books motif echoed the Apocalypse of Peter. What unites these disparate reactions is a tension between faith and fear. The codices force communities to confront uncomfortable questions. How would proven lost scriptures reshape centuries of doctrine? Can faith accommodate artifacts that blur the lines between revelation and heresy? For now, most religious institutions keep these lead-bound enigmas at arm's length, not quite rejecting, not quite embracing, but watching as science inches closer to verdicts that could challenge the very frameworks of belief. The Jordan Lead Codices are not alone in their metallic mysteries scattered across the ancient world. Other metal books whisper of a forgotten tradition where sacred knowledge was etched not on fragile parchment, but on enduring sheets of lead and copper. Take the infamous Dacian lead tablets, unearthed in Romania's Carpathian Mountains. These palm-sized plaques dating to the 2nd century CE bear inscriptions in a hybrid of Greek and Thracian, mixing zodiac symbols with cryptic invocations to the god Zalmoxis. Like the Jordan Codices, their purpose remains debated. Some scholars see them as ritual contracts with the divine, while others argue they were personal amulets meant to ward off evil. The parallels are striking. Both sets use metal as a medium for messages meant to transcend time, blending languages and esoteric imagery in ways that defy straightforward translation. Then there's the lesser-known Huelva hoard, discovered in a Spanish cave near the Portuguese border. This collection of 24 copper plates, etched with a script resembling Tartessian, a lost language of pre-Roman Iberia, includes geometric diagrams eerily similar to those in the Jordan Codices, interlocking circles, 7-pointed stars, and what might be rudimentary alchemical notations. Unlike the Jordan finds, the Huelva plates were neatly stacked in a ceramic jar, sealed with beeswax, as if their creators intended them to be opened only under specific conditions. The Spanish artifacts, though geographically distant, echo the same urgency: the need to preserve knowledge in a form that could outlast empires. Perhaps the most tantalizing comparison lies in Egypt's Akhmim Codex, a single surviving lead book from the 4th century, currently housed in Cairo's Coptic Museum. Its pages depict Christian saints alongside hieroglyphic-like symbols, a fusion that mirrors the Jordan Codices' blend of Jewish and pagan motifs. Most compelling is its colophon, a scribble note that reads, "For the eyes of the elect only," reinforcing the idea that metal books served as vessels for restricted teachings. Unlike papyrus, which could be easily destroyed or altered, lead ensured these secrets stayed intact, visible only to those deemed worthy. What unites these scattered fragments is more than material, it's a shared philosophy of permanence. From the copper scrolls of Qumran to the lead tablets of Dasha, ancient cultures repeatedly turned to metal when the message mattered enough to endure. The choice of lead, heavy and toxic, adds another layer of symbolism. In alchemical traditions, lead represented the primal chaos awaiting transformation. By inscribing sacred texts on this base metal, creators may have been enacting a metaphysical ritual, elevating the mundane into the eternal, yet critical differences emerge. The Spanish and Romanian artifacts lack the Jordan Codices' intricate bindings, suggesting they were meant for personal rather than communal use. The Akhmim Codex, while Christian, shows no signs of the apocalyptic urgency seen in the Jordan plates. These variations hint at a broader spectrum of practices: metal scriptures tailored to specific cultural needs, from individual protection to collective survival. The question lingers: was this a coordinated tradition, or independent innovations responding to similar pressures, persecution, upheaval, or simply the human desire to cheat time? The absence of surviving examples from Mesopotamia and Greece, where literacy flourished, implies metal books thrived on the margins, among communities for whom survival was precarious. Whether these scattered codices form a hidden thread in the tapestry of ancient spirituality, or mere coincidences of necessity, their very existence challenges us to listen harder to the metallic whispers of history, voices that refuse to rust away. The secrets of the Jordan Lead Codices may finally be unlocked not through traditional archaeology, but through cutting-edge technologies now emerging in laboratories worldwide. At the forefront is high-definition 3D surface mapping, a technique that can virtually unroll warped lead sheets with micron-level precision. Unlike conventional photography, which flattens intricate engravings, this method captures every groove and indentation in 3 dimensions, revealing tool marks invisible to the naked eye. Researchers at the University of Cambridge recently demonstrated how such scans could distinguish between ancient chisels and modern engraving burrs based on microscopic striations, potentially settling the forgery debate once and for all. Even more promising is the ability to reconstruct damaged sections algorithmically, filling in gaps where corrosion has eaten away at symbols. A pilot study on one codex plate successfully restored 70% of a previously illegible celestial diagram by cross-referencing surviving fragments with first-century astronomical records. Corrosion analysis is undergoing its own revolution. Traditional patina examinations relied on superficial chemical tests, but new synchrotron radiation techniques can now peer deep into the metal's crystalline structure. At Switzerland's Paul Scherrer Institute, physicists are bombarding codex samples with ultra-fine X-ray beams, measuring how the lead's oxidation layers diffract the light. Authentic ancient patina forms in distinct strata over centuries, like tree rings, while artificial aging leaves telltale chemical, speed lines. Early results from these tests show puzzling inconsistencies. Some plates display textbook-perfect stratification, while others exhibit abrupt mineral deposits that suggest either unusual burial conditions or human intervention. The next phase involves isotope tracing to pinpoint where the lead was mined, potentially linking specific codices to known Roman-era sources in Cyprus or Sardinia. Decipherment efforts are also leaping forward with machine learning. A joint team from Tel Aviv University and Google's AI division has trained neural networks on every known Near Eastern script from the period, creating a Rosetta AI capable of recognizing patterns across fractured texts. When applied to the Codices' most perplexing symbol clusters, the system flagged recurring combinations resembling cryptographic substitution, ciphers used by Jewish rebels during the Bar Kokhba revolt. Even more astonishing, spectral imaging uncovered faint under etchings ghostly preliminary sketches beneath the visible symbols, suggesting the creators drafted their designs before final engraving. This discovery hints at a meticulous production process far beyond the capabilities of opportunistic forgers. Perhaps the most speculative and thrilling avenue involves neutron beam imaging. Unlike X-rays, which struggle with lead's density, neutron beams can penetrate deep without damaging the metal, potentially revealing hidden internal compartments or layered inscriptions. The technique recently revolutionized the study of Mesopotamian clay tablets, exposing concealed writing within seemingly blank lumps. If applied to the codices, it might confirm rumors of hollow plates containing papyrus inserts, a theory fueled by ancient accounts of books within books mentioned in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The European spallation source in Sweden has already reserved beam time for preliminary tests, though the Codices' contested ownership complicates access. What makes these technological leaps so transformative is their potential to bypass centuries of scholarly stalemate. For too long, the Codices' authenticity debate has hinged on subjective interpretations of symbols and stylistic comparisons. Soon, hard data crystal structures, tool marks, isotopic signatures could provide undeniable answers, but even as science advances, one question lingers: if these artifacts are genuine, will we be prepared for what they might reveal? The same techniques that authenticate could also unveil teachings that challenge long-held assumptions about early Judaism and Christianity. The Codices have waited 2,000 years in darkness. Now, as light finally reaches their leaden pages, we stand on the threshold of discoveries that could reshape our understanding of antiquity's most pivotal era. After years of debate, scientific analysis, and impassioned arguments, the Jordan Lead Codices remain suspended between revelation and deception, a riddle that refuses to surrender its secrets. The allure of these metal books doesn't stem from any single theory, but from the way they blur the boundaries between history, faith, and myth. For every scholar who sees them as first-century relics of a forgotten Christian sect, another points to medieval scribble errors or modern forgeries. The metallurgy suggests antiquity, yet the symbols defy easy classification. They could be sacred texts hidden by persecuted believers, alchemical manuals encoding transformative secrets, or even an elaborate hoax designed to exploit our hunger for lost gospels. This very ambiguity is what makes them irresistible. What unites both skeptics and believers is the Codices' uncanny ability to mirror our deepest questions about the past. They tap into the human desire to uncover hidden truths, to hold tangible proof of stories whispered across millennia. Whether authentic or forged, they've become a canvas for our collective imagination, reflecting everything from academic curiosity to conspiratorial intrigue. Their lead pages act like a spiritual Rorschach test. Early Christian scholars see baptismal rites, Kabbalists recognize Merkava mysticism, and treasure hunters decode maps to lost temple gold. This multiplicity of interpretations speaks to something deeper than archaeology. It reveals how we construct meaning from the fragments of history. Perhaps the most compelling lesson of the Codices lies in their resistance to categorization. They refuse to fit neatly into any narrative, challenging the boxes we build around ancient faiths and traditions. The early religious landscape was far messier, more experimental, and more interconnected than modern dogmas suggest. These metal books, with their blend of Jewish, Christian, and possibly pagan imagery, force us to confront a time when spiritual identities were fluid, when symbols crossed cultural lines, and when the divine could be etched into something as humble as lead. The mystery isn't just about the objects themselves, but about why we care so deeply. In an age of instant information, the Codices remind us that some questions don't yield easy answers. They invite us to sit with uncertainty, to weigh evidence without rushing to conclusions, and to marvel at how much we still don't know about the ancient world. Every new imaging technique or linguistic analysis brings us closer to understanding, but also raises fresh puzzles. That tension between discovery and enigma is what keeps historians, believers, and skeptics alike glued to the story. As research continues, with teams across the globe applying AI, advanced spectroscopy, and even quantum computing to decode these artifacts, one thing is certain: the conversation is far from over. The Codices have survived Roman persecutions, medieval upheavals, and modern controversies. Whatever their true origin, they've already achieved what their creators likely intended: they've endured. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Do you think they're genuine sacred texts, clever fakes, or something in between? Share your theories below and keep an eye on the horizon. The next breakthrough might be just one scan away.